Hello guys, it's Sir Grindalot here with an update about my Mage. In my last video you may have seen my Mage in action against Kral, and there have been quite a few changes recently, mostly thanks to my warrior, because my curse is that on my Mage I drop stuff for the warrior, on the warrior I drop stuff for the Mage, and the archer is basically screwed. He gets the leftovers, and my archer is still in a very dire situation gear-wise. It doesn't have much, but let's talk about the Mage first. Things that have changed recently. The helmet, I found an Astral Dahiha, and one of my spare +1 to all abilities enchantments ended up here. Basically, I had the same helmet I had previously. It was a Dahiha infused with a Dahiha as well. But now it's an Astral Dahiha, infused with a Dahiha that had a very good roll. Like, the magical damage was missing the cap by like 50 points, something like that. So very good roll. And the other stats on the enchantment were not very relevant, but whatever. The +1 to all abilities is what matters the most. We will talk about the armor last. These are very big changes compared to the past, because I decided to try the hybrid build. And by hybrid build, I mean Chaos Rings infused with Dragon's Lair, which is halfway between having the full critical build, which is traditionally spellbound infused with Dragon's Lairs, and the bleed damage build, which is usually a Chaos Band infused with a Demon Bone. And the differences are not subtle, because what happens with this kind of hybrid build is that the overall bleed damage is, of course, not as big as what you would do if you had the full bleed build. But what happens is, the first tick of bleed damage from both Chaos Rings hits at the same time as the rest of your skills. Which means, if I cast... Let's see if I can show it. Probably not on the Magician's Tower, because stuff will die immediately. Some tankier mobs here. I'm pretty sure I will not one-shot anything here, especially with the Magic Find build. Oh, good. Let's get rid of Magic Orbit for a moment. Okay, yeah, it's pretty visible. Like, the moment my Magic Missile hit for around 60 billion, now 58 billion against this dude because he's tankier, both Chaos Rings immediately tick for 6.6 billion each. Which means, let's round up, 60 billion multi-missile plus 12 billion from the Chaos Rings. That's on the first tick alone, and which means an increase in damage of basically, what is it, 1/5, more or less. Yeah. Is it? Yeah, it's exactly 1/5. That's a 20% damage increase the moment you hit your target. And when farming, not necessarily here, but you know, when you're farming Forgotten Realm dungeons or other areas, what matters is the burst DPS, not the overtime. Because when you're farming for gear, you don't want to stare at a mob and wait for it to die of bleed damage. You want to deal as much burst damage as possible. So, what's the advantage of having 2 Chaos Rings instead of 2 spellbounds? The advantage is that having 2 spellbounds, you're not increasing your damage by 20% over this build. The 2 ticks of the 2 Chaos Rings deal more damage than anything you can get from a spellbound. Plus, if mobs are tanky and they get more than 1 tick of damage from bleed, that's extra damage that the spellbounds would not be able to do. So overall, in terms of burst damage, so the front load damage that you do before bleed works to its full extent, this build is great. Absolutely great. For much harder mobs, I still believe Devastating Blow is the way to go. But for anything that can be farmed at a reasonable speed, Sorry, I received notification because I forgot to turn them on. To turn them off. As I was saying, that for very, very tanky mobs, I believe the Devastating Blow build is the way to go. But if you're hitting stuff that you can almost one-shot or kill in just a couple of hits, having a couple of Chaos Bands infused with Dragon's Layers gives you a lot of leverage. Because not only will your front load damage be very, very high, but if you find those champion mobs that reduce your damage in half, which are all 4, the extra damage from the bleed can help a lot. And there is another change. In my shield particularly. Here it's an infused Astral Shield with a Dragon's Lair. Wait a moment, Sir Grindalot, how many Dragon's Lair bows do you have? Well, I have 1 on the shield, I have 1 on each Chaos Band, and I have 1 on my Ether, for a total of 4 Dragon's Lair bows. This was suggested, as I mentioned in my crawl video, by Geelong, a user who is part of the community, the AnimA community on Facebook. I believe he's from Singapore. And he pointed out that the extra damage, the extra critical damage that you do with 1 more Dragon's Lair is higher than you can get, is higher than what you can get from a Demon Bone. And I thought, that sounds weird, let's try it. And I tried because my previous shield was a Astral Shield infused with a Demon Bone. And the difference is not huge, but a 4th Dragon's Lair in this build increases damage by a few percentage points compared to having a Demon Bone. Because some people think that you need a Dragon's Lair to reach 100%, you need 3 Dragon's Lairs to reach 100% critical chance, which is true. But the reason why it's very good is because it increases the critical damage by 319%. That's what makes Dragon's Lair very, very good. And I have not tested it with 5. Maybe it will be my next test as soon as I find another Dragon's Lair bow. I believe I don't have any spare ones right now. But if you're farming regular mobs, the difference in damage between a Demon Bone and a 4th Dragon's Lair is not huge. You don't need to worry about it. Like, if you have 3 Dragon's Lair bows in your build, and the rest are Demon Bones, or Dahiha helmets, or whatever, you will be doing fine. But if you're interested in trying to kill Kral as quickly as possible, as I tried to do in my previous video, every percentage point helps. Because what was happening to me is that with my previous armor, I still need to talk about the armor, and my 3 Dragon's Lairs, every time that I killed Kral was between 5 minutes and 15 seconds and 6 minutes. Depending on, a bit of luck here and there, and how many times Kral knocked me back, and all this sort of stuff. But once I increased the damage just a little bit, thanks to the 4th Dragon's Lair bow, and some meddling with the armor, I managed to be around 5 minutes, like very, very close. And on a very lucky run, I managed to do, I believe it was 4 minutes 53, 4 minutes 54, something like that. And I was very happy about it. Very, very happy. It's not like a world time record, but I was very happy about the result. an weapon. An Astral Sword, thanks to my warrior. I believe 1 or 2 videos ago on my warrior I mentioned that I found something very good for the mage, and I was referring to this one. It took forever to find the first Astral Sword, which had a trash roll. And after I infused it and enchanted it, within a couple of days I found one with a much better roll. And then, what was it, 3 or 4 days ago I found this one. And I immediately infused it with a Demon Bone. And you may remember in one of my videos, I dropped an enchantment with +2 to all skills and a small strength bonus, which is not very relevant. And I immediately throw it on this one, because I believe that I will be using this weapon for a very, very long time. The damage is massive, really, really massive. Let's talk for a moment about the armor. Because as you may see, I currently have 3 armors and a bunch of gold keys. My next video will be hunting for enchantment. What I was using was this. An infused Astral Armor with a Demon Bone. And good damage, very good tankiness, but not very good killing time on Kral. Absolutely fine for farming, Forgotten Realms and whatever, but not great for Kral. My second try was this. I've had this Will of the Light King in the bank since before I started making videos. Like, if you go back to my first videos, every now and then when I open the bank, you may notice this armor. It has been there for months. It was the first astral drop I ever found. And I only recently managed to use it. It's a cool piece of equipment, because damage-wise, it's an improvement over the Astral Armor. The Astral Armor has a lot more intellect, and it has the extra orbit, but the extra orbit, it doesn't do that much difference. And Will of the Light King with a +2 to all abilities provides slightly better damage, with a loss of health points. We can have a look at this live. With Will of the Light King I have 134,000 hit points, with Astral Armor 50% more. We are at basically 200,000, which is quite a bit better. In terms of armor, they're essentially the same. You know, the armor value itself makes no difference. The only difference are the hit points. With the Astral Armor, I never died to Kral. With Will of the Light King, I never died to Kral. And my time was always between 5 minutes 15 seconds to 5 minutes 40, more or less. I wanted to do better than that. And how to do better than that? With this. This is a drop that I got on my warrior a few days ago. And it's what made me decide to attempt a Kral run. And I've used the Strength of the Weak for the longest time. It was the first viable armor for Mage that I dropped at tier 4. Back then, I didn't know that you could infuse a helmet into an armor. So I infused a Strength of the Weak on a Strength of the Weak, which is not a very good option. But back then I didn't know. And I used that armor for a very long time, until I found a tier 6 Strength of the Weak. And by then I knew that I could infuse something different, and it was a Dahlia. And that Strength of the Weak, infused with a Dahlia, tier 6, carried me through the whole game. I've always been a fan of that armor. I was so happy to find it in the Astral version. And infusing it with a Demon Bone, this is the highest damage output armor that you can have on a mage. Nothing else comes close. The problem is you have no armor tankiness. It's awful. Let's have a look. Like 100,000 hit points. And I lost basically 20% armor compared to the other armors. This one is not even very good for farming. I died a couple of times using Strength of the Weak with my Mage, because I ended up in a pack of champion mobs, you know, those that reduce your hit points in half, and my armor was not high enough to basically cancel the damage because I was doing higher reincarnation keys, and I just died a couple of times. I had not died with my Mage for the longest time. But yeah, using the Strength of the Weak, I died. So is it a good armor? Depends what's your purpose. Do you want to deal as much damage as possible? Strength of the Weak is your man. It's the maximum damage output you can get. Do you want to be as tanky as possible? Astral Armor. Do you want to be more or less in between? Will of the Light King. But Will of the Light King is very close to the Astral Armor. Strength of the Weak is much better than Will of the Light King in terms of damage. But with Will of the Light King, you don't need to worry too much about dying until the later parts of the game. And I spent some time farming, because I've heard about a bug with Magic Find. It's something that I saw being discussed. This I don't remember if I saw it on Reddit or on the Facebook page. But anyway, people found out that if you put equipment with Magic Find on your character, you enter a dungeon, and then you remove the equipment, and you replace it with damage equipment, so to speak, the game will still count your Magic Find as the one that you had when you enter the dungeon. And this kind of activated my almonds, because for some time I basically gave up Magic Find, because when I went testing on an offline character on my old phone, I realized that having 15, 20, 25,000 Magic Find is not a big deal, since the cap is close to 4 million. But if at no damage output expense, you can have 25, 30,000 Magic Find using gear that is very, very heavily balanced towards Magic Find, that can be quite helpful. Because I started to think, well, if you enter a dungeon with 2 pieces of Edona set, that's basically 5,000 Magic Find just with that. Then you have a shield with 6 gems. That's a lot of Magic Find. A chest with 6 gems, lot of Magic Find, and you could infuse them all with greed, and upgrade them, a lot of Magic Find. I think it would be possible to enter a dungeon close to 40,000 Magic Find, and then swap to your much better gear that you can use for farming, and that's a nice boost both in gold, that I don't need, and Magic Find, which is not bad. Not bad. So yeah, I've been farming during the last few days with the Mage, looking for greeds, looking for the ring called Magnesium, because I believe it's the piece of jewelry with the highest amount of Magic Find on it, and I want to infuse it on the Dona set rings. So yeah, we'll be doing some farming with the Mage in the next few videos. Spec-wise, I've not changed anything on my Mage. It's, as you see here, I just need to remember to put Magic Orbit back in its place before I start farming. And the Australian Wheel is the same as the video from Kral, so Intellect. Well, here Magic Find or critical damage, depending on what I'm doing. And single target, magic damage with swords, increase all ranged skills with swords, and intellect boost. I would be kinda curious to test the last wheel with magical damage instead of intellect, but I believe intellect makes a bigger difference. Anyway, I have more than 3 million spare essence points on my mage because I've been doing absurd amounts of farming. So I may be doing some Australian will tests in the future, I don't know. I will think about it. Anyway, this was my update regarding the status of my mage. Things that I plan to do in the near future, I'm not 100% sure gear-wise, apart from the Devastating Blow build, but I'm not in a rush for that, because I'm still very, very far from focusing entirely on those mobs, you know, Reincarnation 23, 24, 25, probably keys level 700, 800, something like that. And at the moment I'm more focused on Reincarnation, I would say 16, 17, 18, 19 Forgotten Realm dungeons. And this build is working very, very well. Enchantments wise, I don't have insane things. I mean, I have 1+2 enchant 12 skills, +1. This one, I think, magic damage, magic damage, intellect, magic damage, intellect. This one is a +1 to all abilities that I've been using for months on basically all my characters. When I faced the Crawl, I had to remove this one because on either it is a wasted slot, and I replaced it with an Equilibrium infused with a Dragon's Lair. But I don't have other enchantments with +1 to all abilities, and so on that amulet that I used for Kral, I had a +1 to multi-missile, which is not as good, but good enough. Definitely a lot of room for improvements when it comes to enchantments, but I have to wait for the game to give me something decent, and hopefully these keys will help. I also have some in the bank, so who knows, maybe that will be enough. I'm really looking forward to some +1 to all skills. Anyway, this was Sir Grindalot, giving you an update about my mage. I will be checking out, wishing you all a happy grinding. See you next time, guys. Bye bye. Take care.